I knew something was off the moment Rick Salerno called my 24 years of infrastructure work background noise. He'd barely been in the building a month, and he was already strutting around like he personally blessed every Ethernet cable with divine startup magic. The guy couldn't tell a kernel panic from a font error, but he sure knew how to sling around trendy phrases. Flatten the hierarchy. Disrupt the legacy. Inject vibrant energy into back-end engineering. Whatever that's supposed to mean. My name's Margaret Halley, but around here, everyone just calls me Hallie. For over 20 years, I've kept this place from collapsing under its own weight. Rick never even asked what I did. Just looked at me like I came with the furniture. The moment I knew for sure, he rolled in this ridiculous thing called a passion meter and made us fill out daily surveys. Big neon letters said, "Gauge your fire." So I gave myself a 3.14 out of 10 and told him that's how long it took for his enthusiasm to become a cybersecurity risk. He didn't even crack a smile. Just mumbled something about attitude problems and probably wandered off to go vape lemon sorbet in the break room. Now hey, if you've stuck around this long, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of folks who listen to stories like this never do. And trust me, it makes a huge difference for the team behind the scenes. Keeps the lights on and the stories flowing. Alright, back to it. Rick thought he was some kind of tech prodigy just because he could order custom Slack emojis. But I'd been around since the days of dial-up. I watched this company grow from 6 people in a shared WeWork to a $300 million operation with government contracts that depended on us staying online. And I did it all without a ring light or a go-viral strategy deck. What Rick didn't know was that I had a secret. For years, I'd been working on something on the side, something that mattered. A smart load balancer engine that could handle unpredictable bandwidth and make real-time redundancy adjustments. I called it Osprey. I wrote every single line of code myself on my own machines, completely separate from company resources. Clean, documented, version-controlled, locked behind two-factor auth. First, it was just a challenge for myself. But it turned into something bigger. Rick had no clue. What he thought he knew was that I was just part of the old guard. Easy to push out. So he started with those fake alignment chats. HR meetings. Pointless check-ins where they asked how energized I felt about the new vision. I told them I felt energized enough to make it through the next reorg. Nobody laughed. Then came the so-called housekeeping paperwork. Rick handed it out like candy on Halloween. Nothing big, he said. Just some basic IP alignment stuff. I took mine home and read every word. Page 12, paragraph 17. Anything you invent or build during your time with the company, no matter when or where, belongs to them. A full-on land grab. They were trying to claim Osprey. I didn't sign it. Instead, I printed that clause, highlighted it, and stuck a note on it. My original terms stand. Sent it back to HR and gave a copy to my lawyer. That should have been the end of it. But Rick? He couldn't leave it alone. At the Friday town hall, Rick stood under the projector, grinning like he'd just split the atom. With way too much confidence, he launched into a demo of what he called a new architecture initiative the team had supposedly been collaborating on. He unveiled it as Project Helix. And the second he pulled up the interface, my stomach dropped like a stone. It was mine. Not some knockoff. Not an inspired version. It was the real deal. The UI had been stripped back, but I knew every corner of it. Even my debug flag was sitting there in the console, exactly where I'd left it in my testing environment. That smug bastard had scraped my repo. Probably during that one damn weekend when I'd flipped it to public by accident, just to test something on an external node. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I do now. He took Osprey, renamed it, and had the nerve to pitch it as the company's next big breakthrough. I didn't say a thing. Just turned, walked back to my desk, opened a secure line, and called the only person I fully trusted, my IP attorney. She picked up immediately. All I said was, "It's time." Because Rick didn't just try to cut me out. He waltzed straight into a legal minefield. And the guy was too full of himself to even notice the ticking. 2 weeks after Rick's little innovation showcase, the vibe in the office shifted. Everything got quiet. Too quiet. That's always how it starts, the fake calm before the storm. Then the email dropped. Everyone had to sign new alignment agreements. HR packets started showing up on desks like they were freebies at a job fair, covered in cheerful emojis and sticky notes that said, Just a quick update. Rick roamed the floor handing them out like holiday cards. Nothing major, he chirped. Just a little legal cleanup. No need to stress, sign it, send it back. I didn't bite. Slid mine into my tote and kept my mouth shut. Took it home, cracked open a beer, and sat at the kitchen table reading it with the same cold pit in my stomach I'd had when I first opened my divorce papers. And there it was, buried deep in paragraph 17, visible only in the PDF's metadata layer, like they were hoping no one would notice. It read, "Any invention, design, or technology conceived or developed during employment, regardless of location or hours, shall be assigned to the company." They weren't just trying to steal Osprey. They were coming for everything. Every sketch, every code snippet, every 2 a.m. breakthrough I'd pulled out of thin air, just to stay sane while Rick turned our department into a circus. I didn't throw a fit. Didn't shout or break anything. Just printed the clause, highlighted it like I was marking a wound, and typed one sentence in plain 12-point Times New Roman on a blank page. My original terms stand. Sent it back to HR along with the unsigned agreement. No commentary. If they had any brains left, they'd get the message. If not, well, cluelessness was kind of their thing lately. Then Friday rolled around. Another town hall. Rick's favorite spotlight moment. He strolled up in a graphic tee that read "Innovate or Die," grinning like he'd personally written the language we were coding in. And he started pitching our new dynamic load system. Big talk. Glossy slides. Way too much eye contact with the C-suite. "Our engineers have been quietly collaborating on this," he said. "It's a shining example of legacy transformation." And then boom, there it was. Up on the screen. My work. Not retooled. Not even renamed beyond the surface. Osprey. Just dressed in a new interface, branded with a fresh code name. Project Helix. I locked onto the console window. And there it was, my old debug flag still sitting in the corner. Tested Node 9. I'd left that in weeks ago while simulating latency spikes on a remote server. It had never touched company machines. Never been part of any shared repo. There was only one way that code made it onto Rick's screen. He scraped it when I briefly flipped my sandbox repo to public. It was open for exactly 72 hours, just long enough for me to run a test off hotel Wi-Fi during a DevOps retreat. I didn't react. Didn't storm out or raise hell. I just opened Notepad and typed in a timestamp. Friday 1:13 p.m. That's when I started the log. Every lie Rick told got a line. Every time he said "we built" or "our team created" instead of giving credit where it was due. I wrote it all down, calm, clean, and digital. Like I was logging evidence at a crime scene. Because I knew what was coming. They'd bake Osprey into the pitch for our upcoming acquisition. Rick would parade it around as his masterpiece. But once due diligence kicked in, the lawyers and tech auditors would need to trace the origin. And when they did, the first name they'd hit would be mine. Not just because I wrote every line of it, but because 4 years ago, I quietly formed a tiny LLC called Halicore. And last Tuesday, right after Rick's first phony demo, I filed a provisional patent through that LLC. Attached every version of the code, complete with timestamps, access logs, and a usage license that came with one very deliberate clause. Clause 3.2. License revoked upon false attribution. I didn't need to start a fight. I just needed them to lie in writing. And Rick? He was doing that for me live in full color. Tuesday arrived like a storm in a suit, Investor Day. The air smelled like cologne and panic. Rick actually showed up early for once, hair gelled to perfection, lanyard swinging, practically vibrating with ego. He bounced around the lobby like a hype man, throwing out buzzwords, pipeline agility, vertical scaling, like he hadn't just looked them up on Reddit the night before. He escorted the investors in like VIPs. I followed behind, clipboard in hand, not because I needed to say anything, just because I already knew what was about to happen. Rick queued up the projector, beaming like a kid about to wing his way through a fake volcano demo. And then he said it, the line that would eventually blow it all up. "What you're about to see is a breakthrough from our new in-house initiative." He said it 3 separate times. In-house. Like repetition could make it true. Then the demo launched. And there it was again. My system. The architecture. The adaptive load balancing logic. Every threading pattern, every smoothing behavior. Exactly as I'd written it during those long, jittery nights with zero sleep and a bottomless cup of diner coffee. But what really hit me in the gut? The performance graphs. I recognized every curve, every data point. Those were the stress test numbers I'd generated in Osprey's earliest builds. Down to the millisecond. He hadn't even bothered to mask the data. Just scraped my outputs and pasted them into a flashy dashboard, hoping no one would catch the signature. I sat through the entire demo stone still. Didn't flinch. Didn't cut in when one of the investors asked, "How recent is this work?" And Rick, bold as ever, answered, "Last quarter. Born and built right here, under my team's agile framework." That level of audacity could have boiled paint off the walls. But I stayed cool. I logged it, marked the time, captured every statement, watched the CTO nod along like Rick knew what the hell he was talking about when he tried to explain my threading algorithm using buzzwords he barely understood. And when the lights flicked back on in the room filled with handshakes and fake smiles, I quietly slipped out, took the back stairwell. No chit-chat, no goodbyes. By the time I got home, the coffee was already brewing, and I'd pulled out the USB drive, my master copy of Osprey. Every version, triple-backed, checksum verified and ready. I pulled up my call app, scrolled to one name and hit dial. "Hallie," my IP attorney answered, voice half asleep. "I need to move the provisional," I said. "Right now." She didn't say a word at first. Then finally, "You got a name?" I didn't answer. Just dropped everything into her inbox, the log, the screenshot of the debug flag, and the full video I'd quietly recorded of Rick's investor pitch. When I hung up, I sat alone in the garage, lights off, nursing my coffee, watching the blinking cursor on my terminal like it was counting down. Rick wasn't just stealing my work. He was walking into a room I'd built, signing the guest book and bragging that he owned the place. And I was getting ready to change the locks. The trick isn't proving you created something. The trick is proving you always created it, long before some ego-tripping scavenger showed up to slap their name on it. That's what I spent the next 6 days doing. No emotion. No anger. Just pure focus. Timestamps, logic, documentation. I started with my earliest commits, the ones I pushed from this very garage 2 years ago after a non-stop weekend of coding. Every commit had a timestamp, every timestamp tied to a hash signature. I cross-checked them against emails I'd sent myself, naming conventions no one else used, and even old Slack DMs with a former mentee, where I vented about the buggy node rebalancer logic. Found an old Jira ticket on my LLC's private board, Osprey version 0.4, where I'd tested failovers under messy latency conditions. Rick wasn't even on the company radar back then. I archived everything, made 3 separate copies. One of them went into the fireproof safe I hadn't opened since my divorce. Then I pulled the Git logs. Not just mine, his. The company tracked IPs for every internal login. Rick's trail didn't start until after that sandbox test weekend. Even then, his commits were laughable, tweaked comments, changed variable names, some light formatting. Cosmetic fluff. Nothing that even came close to authorship. But Osprey? That system was covered in my fingerprints. From the LLC domain I registered in 2018 to the original design docs, I typed in Notepad++ and emailed to myself under the subject line. "Screw it, I'm building my own." I even had an old Slack export from a freelance dev channel, where I asked a friend, "How do you license something so your own company can't hijack it?" She'd sent me a framework. I used it. That was 4 years ago. I'd forgotten how careful I'd been. Thank God I'm the kind of person who double-versioned her toaster firmware. Once everything was airtight, I logged into the USPTO portal and filed the final move. A formal provisional patent under Hallie Core LLC. It included everything: documentation, visual diagrams, flowcharts, internal logic trees. The full Osprey system. From thread handling to bandwidth load balancing to queue smoothing. Registered, timestamped, and locked. But I didn't stop there. I published a commercial usage license, publicly hosted and easily verifiable. Clause 1.1. Attribution required at all times. Clause 3.2. License is void if false attribution is claimed by any party internal or external to licensee. Clause 5.4. Any derivative system based on the patented architecture must declare Osprey as a foundational framework. This wasn't just legal coverage. It was a velvet-lined landmine. If they moved forward, if they pitched this to investors, stamped it on pitch decks, tried to pass it off as homegrown tech, that clause would go off. And the blast wouldn't touch me. While all this was happening, Rick was still busy posting cheesy motivational quotes in Slack. Success is 99% action. Ideas are worthless without execution. Rick was on a motivational tear in Slack, firing off startup cliches like they were gospel. He had no idea he was basically narrating his own downfall. I didn't respond. I wasn't on defense anymore. I was drafting the terms of their collapse. The second I heard the word strategic acquisition float through the office, my stomach didn't sink, it coiled. Like a cat watching a clueless bird stroll into striking range. Rumors trickled down from legal. $200 million valuation. Tentative buyout on the table. Buyer still unknown. The place lit up like a high school hallway before prom. Suddenly, stock options were the new religion. People who hadn't so much as nodded at me in months started asking how I felt about our shared future. I smiled. Said I was fully aligned. Meanwhile, Rick was flying high. He dropped the fake humility. Started tossing out lines like my vision, my system, and legacy busting in every meeting. Like he was auditioning for a TEDx stage. Osprey. Now it was Project Helix. Rebranded with a sleek logo, a made-up Latin slogan, and some cringe tech bro tagline about reshaping the spine of scalable infrastructure. I half expected him to start handing out branded mugs. Then came the so-called vision alignment session, 2 hours of Rick monologuing, while the marketing team took notes like they were scribes at the Sermon on the Mount. Same code, same slides, same metrics. But this time Rick slipped. This time he said the one thing I'd been waiting for. Our team developed this architecture as an evolution of our legacy throughput logic. I froze the moment in my notes, word for word, stamped it with the date and time. Then I added a bold label, public investor-facing statement. Because now, this wasn't just stolen code. It was liability. He'd pushed the lies straight into the investor pipeline. And when it came time to open the books for due diligence, Osprey would be under a spotlight. So I went home, logged into the National License Registry, and updated a single clause. Clause 3.2. It had already been filed, already enforceable, but now it carried a timestamp. Revocation triggered on date of public false attribution. Inserted meeting time. In that one move, the entire license, the foundation they were standing on for a $200 million deal, disintegrated under their feet. They just didn't know it yet. Rick was still out there rehearsing Investor Q, and as in picking out blazers for demo day. Let him strut around pitching Helix like it was some divine download from the innovation gods. Let him cram it into every deck, call it his personal legacy, pretend he soldered the architecture together with raw talent and JavaScript. Every word he spoke now was one step deeper into a legal grave. I didn't give him a heads up, didn't warn anyone. I just sat in meetings, smiled politely, and dropped lines like, looking forward to supporting this rollout. And, that's great momentum, Rick. Because there's something satisfying about watching someone build a throne on sand you've already soaked with gasoline. At the next all hands, the CEO gave Rick a public shout-out, called him a visionary leader, even hinted at a VP title in the near future. Clapped right along. Didn't flinch. Because while they were out there chasing valuation fantasies, I was wiring the kill switch. The trigger wasn't the repo scrape. It wasn't the rebranding. It was the moment Rick stepped in front of the world and claimed it was his. They mistook my silence for surrender. But silence doesn't mean defeat. Sometimes it's just the sound of the fuse waiting to burn. 2 days before Rick's big vision delivery, pitched to the buyers, I was out in the garden, elbow deep in soil, yanking up invasive vines when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The sender's domain was unfamiliar, but the subject line stopped me cold. IP confirmation request. Reference. Thales Systems/load engine schema. I wiped the dirt off my hands and opened the message. It was from a junior IP analyst at the acquiring firm, probably some sleep-deprived associate drowning in due diligence paperwork who'd stumbled on a red flag. The tone was polite, professional. But I could feel the heat beneath the surface. Can you confirm authorship of engine schema registered under Thales Systems LLC? Appears foundational to Project Helix materials. Seeking clarification for legal review. This wasn't a trap. It was a flare. Someone had followed the breadcrumbs, my license filings, the public repo timestamps, the design logs filed with the USPTO under my LLC. Maybe they were just doing their job. Maybe someone tipped them off. Didn't matter. They'd seen the real name. They had to ask. I didn't hesitate. I replied with a zip file labeled Osprey_ownership_package_3. Inside it, the certified mailing receipt I'd sent to myself the week before. A hard copy of the license, mailed to my LLC's registered address. Screenshots of commit logs and diff maps, clearly showing how the code evolved under my hand. Metadata pulled from the Sandbox repo, complete with access logs timestamped months before Rick had a company badge. And finally, a PDF of the license agreement, highlighting clause 3.2 and the exact timestamp that triggered its revocation. At the bottom of my email, I added one simple sentence. I retain all control unless explicitly transferred in writing. No extra commentary. No signature. No request for a call. The package said it all. It didn't just prove authorship. It established ownership. The kind of ownership that makes investors freeze mid-sentence and sends legal teams into damage control mode. Less than 3 hours later, I got a read receipt from the analyst. Then a second one, from someone in legal with partner in their title. That told me everything I needed to know. Meanwhile, Rick was still out there, basking in the spotlight he'd stolen. That afternoon, his LinkedIn post went live. A wall of buzzwords and self-congratulations. Proud to be bringing bleeding-edge architecture to scale. #innovation, #leadership, #scalability, #Helix. No mention of Osprey. No mention of me. Just a low-effort selfie in front of the conference screen, arms crossed. Chin up like a discount Tony Stark, standing on a platform he didn't realize was already caving in. I didn't comment. Didn't like it. Didn't share. I just closed my laptop, poured a drink and stepped out onto the porch. For the first time in weeks, I slept with the windows open. The storm wasn't on the horizon anymore. It was already inside the building. Wearing a tailored suit, holding every receipt with my name on it. The conference room felt like a boiler wrapped in a PowerPoint deck. 12 chairs, 2 law firms, and enough legal pads to wall off a courtroom. The coffee on the table sat untouched, half full, half cold. The air didn't move. The kind of still that only shows up right before something breaks. Rick strutted in like he was already on the cover of Forbes. Pinstripe suit. Mirror-shine shoes. Hair locked in place like maybe, just maybe, it could hold back the truth. Across from him sat the buyer's team. Calm. Quiet. Stone-faced. Their general counsel opened a slim leather folder, clicked a remote, and the room dimmed as the projector lit up. Slide 1. Thales Systems IP license, Osprey Load Engine Architecture. Centered. Bold. Unmistakable. At the bottom of the slide in bold black letters. Registered under Halicore LLC. Right beneath that, clause 3.2 was highlighted in yellow like a bruise that just started to show. Rick let out a weird laugh, thin and hollow. You could practically hear the plastic in his throat. Can someone tell me what this is? He asked, trying to keep it light. No one answered. The buyer's general counsel adjusted his glasses and looked at Rick like he was already past patience. His voice didn't budge an inch. We need clarification before this goes any further. Was this code, Project Helix, developed internally by your engineering team? Or was it sourced externally? Rick blinked. Looked to the CEO. Then to the CTO. Then back to the lawyer. It's our system, he said, voice cracking just a little. It came from our infrastructure roadmap. Our DevOps. Who authored the core logic? The lawyer cut in, sharp as a scalpel. Rick opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The CTO tried to jump in. Our logs show contributions from multiple team members, but not the question, the lawyer snapped. The schema. The architecture. The adaptive engine logic and threading core. Where did it originate? Rick's face cycled through colors. Flushed red, then drained white. Then somewhere in between, like his skin couldn't decide how screwed it felt. That's when every head in the room turned toward me. I didn't speak. I didn't move. No smug smile. No triumphant lean forward. Just steady eye contact. Calm. Still. Letting the silence do the damage. The CEO opened his mouth like he wanted to say my name, but he wasn't sure if saying it would feel like an admission of guilt. The lawyer didn't wait for anyone. Because if this originated outside the company and was never properly transferred or disclosed, this deal pauses until we can validate IP ownership. Clause 3.2 triggers an automatic revocation in cases of false attribution, unless there's written, signed permission on file. He clicked the remote. Slide 2. Status. License revoked as of timestamp. The room went dead silent. Rick started flipping through his folder like a raccoon pawing at a Rubik's Cube. There has to be some kind of mix-up, he muttered. It was on our servers, I thought. We've been building. No, I said. Just one word. Quiet. Even. Final. I didn't raise my voice or gloat. I simply tapped the binder in front of me and slid it across the table. Inside, a printed copy of the license, the provisional patent filing, the full email thread confirming delivery and receipt by the acquiring firm. The lawyer opened it, scanned a few lines, then nodded. I believe that resolves authorship. Rick just stared at the table like it had turned on him. The CEO leaned back, steepling his fingers in front of his face. Why didn't anyone catch this sooner? No one answered. No one had to. Because when you build your castle with stolen bricks, you better pray the real owner doesn't show up with the deed. And today, I brought the deed. It didn't explode. It unraveled slow, quiet, and precise. Like someone unpicking a tailored lie thread by thread. The acquisition didn't collapse in a single moment. No shouting, no lawsuits on the spot. Just one pen, quietly set down instead of signing anything. The buyer's legal team requested a formal hold, pending clarification of IP provenance. That was Tuesday. By Wednesday, our internal compliance team, 3 fried analysts and 1 visibly exhausted legal rep, was buried in everything I'd already handed over. Git logs, repo metadata, license filings, patent receipts, screenshots, Slack exports. They followed every trail. And every trail led back to me. By Thursday, the masks were off. They weren't even pretending anymore. The CTO canceled the company-wide town hall. The CEO disappeared from the office entirely. HR sent out an all-staff email with the subject line, "Status update on Project Helix." It ran for 4 paragraphs and said absolutely nothing. Corporate filler. Vague phrases like ongoing alignment and internal review processes. Then, right at the end, a quiet little sentence. Individual conversations may follow. By Friday, Rick was gone. No memo. No farewell lunch. No new chapter post on LinkedIn. Just a grim-faced HR rep rolling a cardboard box out the side door while security hovered nearby. Word around the office was he tried to push back, claimed the code was already integrated, the valuation locked in, that his name was all over the roadmap. Didn't matter. Clause 3.2 wasn't a suggestion. It was the circuit breaker. And they pulled it. I didn't watch him leave. Didn't need to. I was in the server room swapping out a busted RAID controller, humming like I used to, before all the politics, before the theft, before the fire alarms went off in legal. That afternoon, legal sent me a letter. Real paper. Heavy stock. Embossed letterhead. Signed in blue ink. Page 1. A formal apology from corporate counsel. Page 2. A consulting retainer offer under HaliCore LLC. 6 figures. Per month. Quarterly renewal. They wanted support for a tool I built on my own time. In my garage. Without their funding, without their permission, and without a single shred of recognition until they nearly lost everything. I didn't throw a party. Didn't post a victory thread. I went home, changed into sweatpants, and grilled a steak with enough garlic butter to send a vampire into orbit. Slept harder than I had in months, like gravity had finally unclenched. Come Monday morning, I walked back into the office. Not as an employee. As a contracted advisor. They handed me a temp badge, same clearance Rick used to have. I clipped it onto the same old lanyard I'd worn for 24 years, right next to the one still stained with coffee from a decade ago. The security door buzzed open the same way. My desk? Still there, untouched. Only real change was on the conference room glass. Someone had peeled off the Project Helix decal. And now read, Osprey Architecture Advisory Support provided by HaliCore. I sat down, logged into my terminal, took a sip of coffee from the same chipped mug I'd used for years. Same office. New title. And for the first time in a long time, The silence around me didn't feel cold or suspicious. It felt earned. Felt like recognition. 6 weeks later, the deal closed. No confetti. Fewer smiles. No Rick. The final valuation came in at $187 million. Down from $200 million. Quiet deduction. No press release. But the reason floated around the office like smoke. Everyone knew. The IP breach hit the bottom line. So did the cost of restructuring after their visionary had been escorted out like an outdated printer. No one said it out loud. They didn't have to. Everyone knew who caused the mess and who kept it from burning the whole thing down. Fally Systems, my LLC, my alter ego, my GarageBorn Plan B, retained full license authority over Osprey. Clause 6.7 made it into the closing paperwork. That clause gave me IP veto power for life. If they ever wanted to pivot, rebrand, fork the system, or sell it off, they'd need my signature. No more rebranding theft. No more buzzword cover-ups. I didn't gloat. Didn't give a speech. I signed the new contract, slid it across the table to the buyer's counsel, and watched them nod without hesitation. They were just relieved the fire was out, even if the burn scars would never quite fade. At the closing dinner, they sat me next to the CTO and across from the lead investor. Everyone played it like it was just another business deal, just another Tuesday. The wine was overpriced. The steak? Under-seasoned. When the toast started, someone, I couldn't even tell you who, maybe one of the older architects from the buyer's team, lifted a glass, looked straight at me, and said with a half-smirk, "Next time, maybe just ask the person who actually wrote the damn thing." A few laughs around the table. Even the CEO gave a subtle nod. I didn't smile. Didn't nod back. Just raised my glass and let the silence do its work. Later that night, I pulled into my garage. The motion light flickered on overhead. Same dusty shelves, same rusted socket set, same leaning stack of old company awards shoved in the corner. Employee excellence, system stability, long-term service. All the shiny little tokens they'd handed me over the years instead of raises, recognition, or real protection. I reached up and pulled one down, the heaviest one from 2012. Some meaningless phrase engraved in gold paint. Infrastructure brilliance. I stared at it for a minute. It didn't feel like anything. Didn't even feel like mine. I wiped off the dust, walked over to the bench, and dropped it into a cardboard box labeled donation. Then I turned off the light, locked the garage, and went inside. They asked who owned it. I didn't argue. Didn't posture. Didn't shout. I just showed them the receipt.